Hi, Chris Nelson here. It's Friday, May 12th, 2023. This Reopen Chris show. I'm here with Dr. Joel Rudman, who Doc Rudman is also a state legislator, as the founders actually set this country up to have a citizen legislature. And you're a family doctor, and you were just with the Governor DeSantis yesterday. Can you just tell us a little bit what happened, the monumental things that happened for medical freedom in the state of Florida yesterday?
Absolutely, Chris. And listen, thanks for having me on. As you know, yesterday was a big day for me. Governor DeSantis came up here in our backyard, right here in the Florida Panhandle, and we signed three important bills into law. One of them being my Protections of Medical Conscience bill, and it was a great day all around for the freedom fighters of Florida. Let me tell you.
Now, Doc Rudman, I mean, to me, all the other things that medical freedom goes along with, it really all hinges on medical conscience. Really, the right of a doctor to decide what they want to do, how they want to treat. Could you just talk about medical conscience for a minute? What this bill does, what this law
Absolutely.
does?
Absolutely, Chris. So I'm very proud of the bill that was signed the other day. Medical conscience, the bill that was signed was actually two bills in one. I'm not sure if people realize that, because if you look at last year's session, there was an independent bill specifically for medical conscience, and there was another independent bill protecting physicians' freedom of speech. Well, this year we rolled both of those concepts into one, because if you think about it, Chris, the two go hand in hand, right? How are you supposed to know what guides my principles? How are you supposed to know what weighs on my conscience if I'm not allowed to share that verbally with you? And unfortunately, that's the world we're living in nowadays, Chris. You know, society's going more and more towards, following orders, following the diktats of your authoritarian government. And so this bill gets back to what medicine was supposed to be all about. You go to your physician with the problem. The physician tells you what he thinks is in your best interest, not mine, not somebody else's, not Tony Fauci's best interest. It's what's in the patient's best interest. And that truly is what conscience is all about. We're not going to steer you wrong. We're not going to do things we think we shouldn't be doing. It's all about protecting the patient.
Yeah, and Dr. Rudman, we saw so many of doctors like yourself, like Dr. John Littell. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Just open up Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book. There's a whole list of them. And just what I actually didn't know this had happened to you. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what happened to you when these little online safety patrol tattletales tried to get you in trouble. What happened?
So, Chris, it's really weird, wild stuff, and I'm glad you mentioned Dr. John Littell, because I actually got to meet Dr. Littell, and I've got an interesting story about that. So basically, in a nutshell, I'm one of those docs that tried to promote sanity, right? I would go on Facebook and I would post what I would think. Even today, I look back; those are reassuring posts. I tried to tell my community and anybody that was watching that, look, guys, to physicians, there's an emergency every single day. This is just the latest emergency. We're going to get through this. We don't have to lose our minds over this. We certainly don't have to lose our freedoms over this. So I was letting my community know, Chris, that look, everything's going to be okay. And then there's some woke activists out there, believe it or not, they don't want you to think that everything's going to be okay. They said, how can this guy be a doctor? We need to call for his medical license. And when they realized that my medical license was run through the state of Florida and there's nothing they could do about it, they said, well, what's the next best thing? Well, they reported me to the American Board, which is our board certification group, the American Board of Family Medicine, because they figured since we can't get at his license, let's at least try to have him decertified so people think he's a bad doctor. Now, the funny part of the story, Chris, I get this warning letter. It's basically a letter of investigation from the American Board of Family Medicine. Long story short, I called the president of the organization. I got myself off the hook in about 5 minutes, right? Because it was groundless. There was nothing for them to base that investigation on. But you know what I discovered, Chris? The letter I got from the American Board was actually a form letter. And our mutual friend, Dr. John Littell, got the same exact letter I received. The only difference was the name and the address on the letter.
Well, they actually pulled Littell's not license, his board certification. This is not a medical license, and this is important. This is a board certification, and this is some board in Tennessee. And he actually they sent this hilarious letter if it wasn't so serious and that could affect his life and his patient's life. But this letter was like a list of grievances about his youth, about his Rumble channel, who he was hanging out with, which was other doctors, and they actually used other doctors' words against his. And we know this when you go and you talk at some of these things. Some doctors will sometimes get up that they're not. I don't even know if some of them are really doctors. They have like podcasts. And they seem to kind of just gravitate towards things where they can get themselves lots of exposure. But like with Dr. Littell and you guys are just like family doctor. You guys don't have podcasts. You guys aren't, trying to hot gold or anything like that. You're longtime family physicians. And with him, they were like, well, you were at this conference where somebody else said something. And we see this kind of guilt by association thing. They actually pulled his license, but they didn't pull yours.
It was really ludicrous.
License, certification.
So Littell, yeah, that was a follow-up letter he got, and I've actually have a copy of that letter. And like you said, it's laughable. It's like if the general public could see what the woke crowd are actually up to, I mean, you would just dismiss it out of hand. The letter Littell got, as you said, it's blaming him for words that came out of somebody else's mouth who just happened to be on the same stage as him. And again, last time I checked, Chris, we live in America. I mean, you have the right to say anything you want as long as it's not, defamatory or inflammatory or hate speech. So if there's a guy on stage with me, I was on stage with DeSantis the other day. If somebody on stage with me says something I don't agree with, what am I supposed to tackle them? Am I supposed to, what is it they expected Dr. Littell to do? I mean, it was just laughable.
Well, yeah, and then they took his certification, but it was just the extent that they went looking this up. And I had this happen with other doctors too, because my wife actually got a prescription to not wear a mask from somebody. And there were doctors that were nice enough, because what would they tell you in these counties? They were like, oh, well, you need a doctor's note to not, if you can't wear a mask, because there's people that not only is it stupid, but that for other reasons they can't wear a mask. And then what would happen is these doctors would be outed by what I call the Twitter demon mob.
Right.
Calling them Antifa or calling them is not really 100% accurate. I just call them the demon mob, because it's like all these little demons just come out of it and they start attacking you, and you can tell their profile, but they kind of look, their faces are a little bit deformed. They look like they have some serious problems. And these were the kind of people that were attacking people that were writing prescriptions for people to not have to wear a mask. And they weren't making a lot of money to do this or anything. They were doing it because it was the right thing to do, because it was conscience. So,
well, Chris, I actually have a story on that too. So you probably believe that you reap what you sow, right? So there is a school board superintendent in Leon County who's now beginning to reap what he sowed, right? I don't know if you remember back during the COVID era, Leon County was one of those counties where they wanted kids behind masks forevermore, right? These kids are never going to see each other's smiling faces. We don't care what the governor says. We don't care what the CDC says. They're going to be living behind an iron mask, basically. And so, Chris, while I was running for office, or once my name got out on Facebook, I started getting requests from Tallahassee from some of these concerned parents, because we're talking about parents of children with autism. We're talking about parents of children with ADD, children with some serious disorders, maybe some anxiety issues, maybe some breathing issues. And Chris, these parents reached out to me because they said, our school superintendent in Leon County is forcing our child to wear a mask. And again, in the case of an autistic child, Chris, maybe the child won't sit still. Maybe he won't wear the mask. Well, they said, our superintendent is threatening us with expulsion. They're going to expel our child just because he won't sit calmly with a mask on. So, Chris, we literally had new patients join our practice all the way from Tallahassee, which is 8 counties away. They drove all the way to Navarre, signed up as new patients. I was honored to do it specifically to get a mask waiver form signed. And when I asked them, look, I'm happy to do it, but why are you all the way over here in Navarre? They said, because no one in the other 8 counties, no doctor was willing to put their name on this paper for fear of retribution. Isn't that awful?
Well, their tactics, these tactics really worked because, a friend of mine, all of a sudden there's this jackass on Twitter. I think he's still on there, but it's this guy with this like giant face and this giant beard. And he like comes like right up in it and he goes like this and stuff. And he made it his mission to sick the mob on anybody, any doctor. And this was a chiropractor who was giving out prescriptions for people that couldn't wear a mask. And next thing you know, they're writing all these fake reviews on his Google page and graffitiing his Google page. And really, honestly, that shut him up. After that, he, I really didn't hear much from him again. He was, when it can't, because they know, attacking you, with attacking your income stream, attacking your livelihood, and Google can be on their side a lot of times. This is what ends up happening. So to protect so you were saying with this superintendent Leon County, he's getting, that's Tallahassee, right?
Yeah, it's Tallahassee.
He got kicked out because we booted our superintendent out down here in Broward.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe the Leon County superintendent is starting to feel some of the consequences of his actions, and I think it's an ongoing process. But again, this is what happens when you let the inmates run the asylum. We got away from what this country was founded upon, and really, Chris, just from a healthcare perspective, think of all the other illnesses and disease. Think of all the things you're probably exposed to today and you don't even think about it. You may have been at the Home Depot, and there may have been someone there with hepatitis C. You don't care. I mean, it's none of your business. It's that person's business. You may have come across somebody else with tuberculosis. We never lost our minds over other people's healthcare problems. And I don't know why we started doing that in 2020. Our attitude here in the Panhandle was always, look, if you're sick, stay home, right? I mean, don't ask me to bundle up and mask up and PPE up, all because you don't feel safe. If you don't feel safe, stay home.
Well, it was crazy down here. And I want to say that now, thanks to one of the bills signed yesterday, mask mandates for children, actually for everybody, but for school children, which have been illegal in Florida since the 2021 special session. And before then via executive order, even though some of these school board hags went against it, is that yesterday this was signed permanently. So if there's any other variant that comes up or any other crap or any other magic virus escapes a Wuhan lab, then we will not have to. In Florida, there's going to be no more mask mandates. Now, down here it was a little different, and I want, we had it was insanity down here. But
I can imagine.
You gave a speech on the floor where you talked about a bunch of different things, and I noticed there are a lot of Democrats having a major spasm. And I saw that who was Dan Daly, who's from down here. I got to tell you, this guy is wonderful at ceding his time on the floor to women, and really, you don't have to comment on this, but I noticed who's in control of the Democrat Party in Florida, and it's not the men. But they were going nuts, comparing this to Jim Crow laws. They were discrimination. But I listened to your speech and I read the bill and all the reports, all these things. This bill has a section in it against discrimination. Can you talk about that for a minute?
I would love to, Chris, because you're exactly right. Look, this bill is crafted based upon previously existing law in 5 other states. And as you just explained, Chris, in 3 of those 5 states where they have a conscience law, they don't even bother to mention discrimination. The only two that mention it are Mississippi, right, for probably obvious reasons. And the other one that mentions race is South Carolina. The other three states with this law they don't even have anything about discrimination in their statutes. So obviously, no one is worried about this bill being used in a discriminatory fashion. But what we did, Chris, what I personally did here in the state of Florida, because we heard the gnashing of teeth and the wailing in the back, I purposely added anti-discrimination language to our statute, to our bill, in an effort to kind of reassure those people. But as you said, it's never enough. You get these wild exhortations, from the back row. It's obvious that they don't read the bill. It's obvious that, no matter whether I tell them 70 times, 80 times, or 100 times, they're going to spin it the way they want to spin it. And the good news is, Chris, that when this is all said and done, we're going to look back in 5 years, and people are going to look back and say, what was all that wailing and gnashing of teeth about? This is an excellent law.
I mean, this is what it says. The exercise of the right of medical conscience is limited to conscience-based objections to a specific healthcare service. This section may not be construed to waive or modify any duty of a healthcare provider or healthcare payer may have to provide or pay for other healthcare services that do not violate their right of medical conscience. Healthcare services, nobody can opt out of them for a patient based on the patient's or potential patient's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. I mean, you've got all this right in here, and this will actually give doctors the ability to not face retribution from vindictive medical boards that are out of state. And also, it will allow them to not participate in something like, say, if the CDC is pushing remdesivir, and
right,
which is Dr. Fauci's drug, and vaccines, but you and Dr. Littell, in his case, say no. That voice inside me saying doing the right thing. I'm seeing that this other drug is working to cure my patients, and the other drug is having harm on them. In this type of situation, just tell me how your law will protect doctors like that from retribution from the medical boards, retribution from the mob, and retribution from any other entity.
Well, and to be honest with you, Chris, I think you hit it right on the head. I think what we're dealing with here, when we're talking about the other party, I think right now their backs are against the wall. They're backed into a corner. The other party sees everything as an attack on them. And, they're almost to the point of being ultra paranoid about this. This has nothing to do with politics. This has nothing to do with ideology. This has to do with protecting the rights of physicians, not from patients necessarily, not from certain patients. Really, Chris, it's more to protect physicians and their livelihood. Unfortunately, we're living in an era where a lot of physicians are employed. They're employed by big corporations, big hospitals. I'll give you a good example. I have a friend that I went to residency with in Daytona Beach. She practices in Central Florida. There are certain prescriptions she does not write because she has a problem with those medications. Now, she is an employed doctor. Do we really want the CFO of the hospital? Do we really want the corporate accountant to have the right to come to her office after hours and say, Dr. X, you'd make a whole lot more money for us if you would write this prescription. We really think you should write this prescription. Your contract's up next month, and we would really appreciate it if you would start writing a prescription that you're opposed to. That doesn't sound like America, and these are the kind of physicians that we want to protect. And Chris, that's a good point you made. The wailing we heard from the back row, every single analogy, every single hypothetical that they threw at me, it was always from the sense of, well, I don't want you to change my doctor's opinion. I've got this doctor that writes X, Y, and Z for me, and once your bill is passed, he won't write that in. He won't write that anymore. And I'm thinking, Chris, I'm thinking they don't understand. This bill isn't to protect the doctors you currently see. It's not the doctor you love and see today. It's to protect those doctors who you disagreed with, who you probably don't see. And we had an example of a legislator stand up and say, well, if I want this, well, I demand this. I expect to get this. And that's not how medicine works. You go to the doctor with your symptoms. He arrives at the diagnosis and he or she tells you, well, this is what we normally do for this. So we're putting power back in the hands of physicians where it belongs. We're taking power away from cancel culture. We're taking power away from big pharma, from the Faucis of the world. We're taking power away from corporate medicine. And that can't be anything but a good thing in my eyes.
Because you made a good point on the House floor that people today, they see on TV, because we see all these commercials for drugs. And then, of course, the drugs that, are really good, they don't even need to advertise those, and I'm going to go to my doctor and see if he can give me some of this stuff. I'm having trouble with paying attention, blah, 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 but the way that medicine is done now, you made a point that you don't have people coming in and with their symptoms and stuff, but that saying that this isn't going to affect people and how they are now. And it really it befuddles me, because you see some of these same people talking about abortion, and it seems like only when it comes to abortion, suddenly, like, they're like, that's what freedom is abortion. and then they turn around and they're so viciously against this bill that allows doctors to not be so uniform having to do something. I came across a lot of people that were having trouble with taking their children to a pediatrician, and they weren't giving them all their 57 vaccinations that they're requiring today, and some of these pediatricians wouldn't see them. Are these pediatricians afraid that they're going to have retribution against them if they are outed as a pediatrician that sees unvaccinated children? And will this new law help these parents that are choosing now not to vaccinate their kids to find a pediatrician?
Well, so Chris, I think you've discovered that the wokeism runs deep in many facets of our society. Unbeknownst to a lot of us, it's been creeping its tentacles into just every facet of life, and medicine is no different. When you look at pediatricians, when I hear stories, even in the Panhandle, of patients who are bringing their children to my practice, we always ask, well, what practice did you come here from? Who was your previous doctor? And a lot of times, Chris, I'll walk in the room and I'll say, well, what's wrong with Dr. So-and-so? I noticed you used to see Dr. So-and-so. And I hear these stories, even in the conservative Panhandle, of pediatricians who will lay down a law. They'll say, here's the red line in the sand. If you don't give your kid vaccinations when and how I say, hit the road. And it's happening in Pensacola, it's happening in Fort Walton Beach, it's happening in Tallahassee, Panama City. So I think, Chris, what you're referring to, it's the fact that this ideology, this idea that somehow you can boss people into doing what you want them to do. And where this came from, Chris, this is liberalism at its core, because when I was in medical school, and my attitude as a conservative, as a person who believes in liberty, as a person who believes in individual rights, I approach every patient that, look, I'm your advisor. I'm going to tell you what I think you should do, but I am not Big Brother. I'm not going to follow you home. I'll have patients who are chronic smokers, and we all know that's not the best thing for your health, right? But patients will come in, their cigarettes will be right here in their front pocket. I'll tell them, hey, you really should throw those things away, but I do not have the right to reach in that front pocket and throw them in the trash can. I certainly don't have the right to follow them home and be sure that they're following my suggestions, because they're just that. They're suggestions. So these pediatricians, who for the most part are liberal, they're woke, they're being indoctrinated in their residency programs. These pediatricians who think that they're big brother for all of the parents who bring their children in, that's got to change, Chris. And, that may be the focus of a bill of mine next session. As a matter of fact, I am currently looking into the situation of what they're teaching our young doctors in medical schools nowadays, because we may have to root some of this wokeism out of our medical schools, I'm afraid.
Well, I also figured that this kind of bill, I've already heard from multiple doctors, people that they say they're doctor on Twitter, but, you could look at somebody's Twitter and kind of tell if they're serious or not. But yeah, some people that are like, hey, I'm a doctor practicing here, over here. I want to come to Florida because Florida is a state, because, and here, I don't want somebody, even if I might feel like, oh, I might want this medication or I might want this or that, I don't really want to go to a doctor and have him give me medication that's going to harm me. And because later on, how am I going to feel about that when I'm dead from it? And, we saw so much of this in the hospitals where they were giving people this CDC protocol of ivermectin, not giving early treatment for COVID, demonizing everybody that was handing out hydroxychloroquine, hydroxychloroquine. It's really sick what they did with this. And do you think this is going to shift the culture in Florida? I think this is something that's going to be a little bit gradual, but over 5 years, over 10 years, the effects of this law. Maybe you can talk about how it's in other states, how it's worked and what they've seen.
I think, Chris, again, you have a good sense of this. It is about a culture change. It is about a sea change. We're not going to turn our doctor's offices into Burger King. It's not have it your way. Just like when you go to an accountant, you can't demand of your accountant, you're going to get me a tax refund. That's actually, Chris, to be honest with you, that's where my activism in terms of medicine came from. I was meeting with my accountant one day at a Bennigan's or something like that, and he walks in on his cell phone and he's talking to another client, and he tells the client, hey, look, I'm not going to jail for you. If you expect a refund, you're going to have to find another accountant, and he went, boom, and I think that's the way we have to treat all of our professionals with respect. And I think physicians have certainly earned their respect. And we have to get back to, we're not peddling goods here. We're not peddling the latest Pfizer product. That's not why I opened my practice. That's not why I have a shingle on the door. We're there to provide advice. We're there to help save lives. And Chris, one other point I wanted to make, I never got the chance to say this in committee. I never got the chance to say this on the House floor because I was too busy, fending off the muggers, on the House floor.
They come at you,
crazy, man. It was insane. But one point that I think is worth saying here on your podcast. So the last time in the state of Florida that we tried to tell doctors what to think and what to do you know what happened? That was the opioid crisis of the 1990s. I was a resident, Chris, when they came up with this cockamamie BS about how you have your vital signs, blood pressure, heart rate, respiratory rate, temperature. They said pain is now going to be the fifth vital sign. And Chris, all of us young doctors, we looked at this corporate garbage and we said, people can fake pain. You can't ask someone what their blood pressure is and they'll be able to predict their blood pressure. It is a fact. Your numbers do not lie. But they wanted us to ask patients, in the office, in the ER, ma'am, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain? And of course, Chris, no one's ever answered, my pain's a 1. I'm here in the ER and my pain is a 1. And so they tried to tell hospitals, physician practices, and individual physicians that doctors, you need to treat this seriously. If anyone says their pain is a 10/10, you better treat them with narcotics. You better give them this OxyContin. And of course, the rest of the story. You know what happened, not just in Florida, but in the rest of the nation. That's what started the opioid crisis. It wasn't that doctors wanted to prescribe that garbage. It's that they were told and forced to prescribe that garbage. Hospitals too.
I can tell you, this is one of the clips that's going to come out of the show right here, because what people, if you don't already know how opioid addiction works, is it starts with a doctor. A lot of people, and then people wonder, oh my goodness, Mike was he was like successful with a job, or she was was an accountant or whatever, did this or that. How the hell did she turn into a drug addict? Well, just trace it back to the car accident, or trace it back to whatever she had. Got a little taste of that, because what people need to understand is some people can't even take a taste of that stuff. There are certain people that if you take opioids or drink too much alcohol, it makes you woozy and you don't really want much more. But then there are other people that can't even take a taste of that stuff, because when they get addicted to it, and then when they can't get it anymore, they hit the streets for it, and then they end up with a fentanyl pill that kills them. So that's how these deaths end up happening. But you're telling me that this came from a Faucian style directive and that's so indicative of our society, though. What's your pain? People really worship their feelings in our society. You notice this? It's all just about, how do I feel? And feelings don't really, they can lie to you and stuff like that, so
well, and there was another bill that I spoke passionately about. Representative Randy Fine had a couple really good bills, about the mutilation of children. And that's one of the points I made on the House floor in that debate, is that, look, I see kids who are confused. I see kids who are struggling with their identity, but, I don't make money off of them. I see them. I sit them down in my clinic. We talk it out. We talk for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. And you know what, Chris, I can spend all day with them. I get like $40 for doing that. Now, these SOBs up at Vanderbilt, for example, when they propose these radical surgeries, hey, we're going to chop this off. We're going to take cadaver skin and fashion you a new organ. These docs up at Vanderbilt, I mean, let's be honest. I think you actually had video, right? Everyone saw the video of the one doctor at Vanderbilt University who was telling her peers, hey, there's a lot of money in this. We are making a lot of money for the hospital by proposing these horrendous surgeries. And again, like you say, sometimes you just have to follow the money trail to know why things are the way they are. Like I said on the House floor, you got to serve somebody, right? You either have to serve your inner conscience, or you don't want the doctors that serve the almighty dollar. I can tell you that.
Well, I saw this when I went to a hospital, and we saw that these hospitals basically kidnapping people, and then they were getting $39,000 to use ventilators and remdesivir. Yeah. And I was just wondering, like people just sat back. There were a few nurses that spoke up, but a lot of people just didn't say anything. And I was like, and I looked up, my wife was telling me that the highest percentage of any profession, I had this, that joined the Nazi party were doctors. And, really it's just kind of scary how some doctors behaved. But you're a doctor, and there's a lot of people, they would go like, oh geez, you can't say anything bad about doctors or nurses there. But some of the behavior I saw, I mean, what do you just think about that, about how, and will people within hospitals, because I think some of these people they just really were afraid of losing their job, and they saw people get demonized, and they saw bad things. They just didn't want to say, well, this law empower a doctor in a hospital if they're in a situation where they're being told, oh, you need to prescribe remdesivir and put them on a ventilator, but the doctor's saying, I need to give this guy ivermectin, or actually at that point it was too late for ivermectin, which was really sad. But will this empower doctors and hospitals to not to be able to use their own judgment and their own conscience, rather than listen to the CFO or these guys that aren't even doctors or anything?
So I think my conscience law will certainly go a long ways towards helping those doctors do what they know is the right thing. You also had Representative Griffith's bill signed that same day in Destin, which codified all of Governor DeSantis's protections for hospital workers and individuals and patients and physicians. So that'll go a long ways as well. But I tell you what's going to be the big kicker, Chris, in terms of the situation you described, in terms of why does the hospital force this down your throat? Why do they make you follow this protocol? The hospitals currently get COVID liability protection under state statute. That's due to expire this summer. And Chris, you heard it here first. You heard it here first. We have to let that law expire, because that law, even though it was written with the best of intentions, there's a phrase in that statute that says that hospitals cannot be sued as long as they follow CDC protocol. That's the phrase that got everyone in trouble, because it should be a hospital can't sue or a doctor for doing their best judgment in an unknown situation. Instead, they used CDC protocol as the phrase, and that's the phrase that poisons the whole statute. We've got to let that thing expire, because that's why hospitals are so hesitant to use things like ivermectin and so hesitant to use things like hydroxy, because that's not what Fauci told them to use. That's not what the CDC's telling them to use. So to answer your question, we've got to let that COVID liability expire. We can't just give them blanket immunity as long as they follow Lord Fauci and his edicts. They've got to use their best judgment. We've got to get back to trusting our physicians. And look, I'm an equal opportunity offender. I'm not out to protect bad doctors. I'm sure where you are in Fort Lauderdale, I'm sure you know who the bad doctors are. I'm sure you know the guys that'll sell stuff out of the trunks of their cars. We have them in the panhandle. We're not out to protect those guys. There's nothing in any of these bills that protect bad actors. We want to protect the doctors that are out there doing the right thing, who aren't kissing the ring of Tony Fauci.
Yeah, and I believe that's set to expire in 15, 16, 17 days,
Yep.
June 1st, and a bill didn't go through to renew it, right? There wasn't any
Right.
renewed it. And that it's unfortunate that it didn't get dropped last summer, but I know that that's not something that that the governor wants to do.
But like I said, I'm an equal opportunity offender. When we see physicians that are doing bad things, we're going to call them out. And that's why I felt so passionate about saying that on the House. People assume because I'm a doctor that I'm somehow part of the special interest group, or that I'm out to fatten my wallet, or out to help the Florida Medical Association. Look, I've taken votes already in my freshman year that run contrary to what the Florida Medical Association believes, because we're not going to protect we're not out to protect the bad actors. And I'll give you a good example of that. It was those doctors up in Vanderbilt. If you remember from my House debate, I actually referred to them on the House floor as bloodsuckers. So don't think because I have MD after my name that I'm going to protect every doctor out there. Just like any profession, there's bad actors everywhere. And it's funny, Chris, I was speaking in front of a partisan crowd, kind of like the other day in Destin, right? I was in front of a bunch of people who just really adored me. And so I took the opportunity to say, ladies and gentlemen, I said some things the other day on the House floor that, I should have chosen my words more carefully. I referred to doctors at Vanderbilt, those doctors doing those butcherous, horrendous experiments on children. I said, I referred to them as bloodsuckers, and, it's been a couple of weeks now, and I've had a chance to think about my words, and I really regret my choice of words. And so I want to issue an apology. And so I said, to all of the bloodsuckers out there, I apologize for putting you in the same context as these vile, evil doctors at Vanderbilt, because they give bloodsuckers a bad name, right? I mean, there's right and there's wrong, and we've got to expose the doctors that are doing wrong, and we've got to protect the doctors that are doing right by their patients.
I just think you've hit this right on. And, talking to any medical freedom advocate out there, I have poured over this stuff. I just think that, when things are changing, I know a lot of people want what they want right now. But a lot of times, if you listen to Dr. Rudman, it's about changing the culture. And if a ship is going all in one way, it's not just going to be one day that you're going to just be able to flip it around and going the other way. There's a whole culture change that needs to happen. But, I heard you, Dr. Rudman, you gave some, I'll tell you, I love the DeSantis pressers. People that say he doesn't have charisma, I don't know what they're thinking, but still, I do think charisma is cheap, but charisma is important. But I got to say, when you got up there to that stage and you were really speaking, when I heard you on the House floor and when I heard you up there, I really saw somebody that I think would have potential for potentially higher office in Florida, possibly even executive office. Have you thought about a run for governor?
Well, Chris, again, I'm humbled that you would put me in that kind of conversation, in that kind of category. To be honest with you, my idols were always people like Patrick Henry. When you think of the founding fathers, there's the obvious ones, right? There's Washington, there's Madison, there's Jefferson. I like the guys who really came up with the philosophy of the movement. And I like the guys who weren't in it for personal gain. Patrick Henry, the furthest Patrick Henry ever got was governor of Virginia. And that's because, he was.
Hello. There you go. All right. So you want to be a Patrick Henry, because the thing is we'll end up, the next governor is going to be a Republican. Okay. We all know this. And if we don't, put somebody up that's got the freedom fire in their belly, we're going to end up with the establishment candidate de facto. That's why I'm hoping for somebody, the next Ron DeSantis to come out.
2026 is a long time away. Like I don't even know what I'm eating for dinner tomorrow, right? But I tell you what, having one session under my belt in the Florida House, I got to tell you,
you're a freshman. This was your first session.
Yeah,
you got this bill. This is your first time in the House for your first year. You have got to be kidding me. So you just decided in 2020 you're going to run, or 20.
That's right, buddy. They poked the bear and I went for it.
Good for you. I really regret not having run for something myself, because it was such a sweep, even down here. But good for you. You're a freshman and you're able to accomplish this. Because we've heard from other people that have held office that they are a lot of talk, but they don't really get things done. And they don't ever seem to get a bill across the finish line for the amount that they yap. But you're a man who has got things. Wow, in your first year, that's pretty
well. And I gotta be
accomplishment.
I gotta be honest with you. It's I love it, man. I love it. I love coming on shows like this. I love getting the message out. I'm just the messenger. I didn't create this message. The founding fathers are the ones who created this message. I'm just the conduit, right? So I love the arena. I love going toe to toe with the other side. I've got Democrats that I text daily, because if nothing else, I like to tweak them, right? I like to under their skin a little, and of course, it's all in jest, right? But I want them to know that, hey, look, we're doing great things in this state. You can either hop on the train or the train's leaving the station, buddy. You know what I'm saying? And I love the hand-to-hand combat, right? I love someone. You've seen the memes, Chris, where people are sitting at the desk and it says, "Prove me wrong."
Oh, yeah.
That's my attitude with the Democrats. And listen, they've got some talent on the other side, right? They've got some high-powered lawyers. They got some people who are pretty talented. They're just misguided. And so I give them every opportunity to prove me wrong, and they can't. They can't. They've lost every argument, and I look forward to my next 7 arguments next session.
Well, they can't, and this is where the demagoguery comes in and the accusations of racism, because they don't have anything else. But unfortunately, this gets echoed by the media, and then you have people like my dimwit commissioner down here who goes on a little tirade about this bill, and I actually called him out. I said, "No, Commissioner Glassman, that's not what the bill says."
Right.
Because he was talking about, oh my goodness, LGBTQ plus people are going to be discriminated against. And I'm like, you didn't even read the bill, did you? You don't even know what this means. Now,
So Chris, so Chris, let me give you a for instance. So because that's the example that kind of, it offends me, really, right? Because I take care, like I said, I take care of kids with gender dysphoria. I don't do it because someone's holding a gun against my head, right? I do it because I love these kids and I want them to understand. I want to help them through their process, and I want them to kind of see the light, right? They're going through a rough time, and let's say you've got these doctors in Fort Lauderdale that are taking care of. Let's say they do things I don't do. Let's say they're giving them testosterone or what have you. What does that say about you if you think because of my law that your doctor that you loved yesterday is all of a sudden going to hate your guts today and discharge you from your practice? Doctors don't work like that, Chris. We don't. If we see you, it's because we love you. And so those same doctors are going to continue to see that same patient. So members of these different communities, they have nothing to fear. We're not out to change your doctor. We're out to protect those doctors that you're trying to cancel.
I've learned this though with liberalism, which really isn't liberalism. It's, you call them libs today or whatever you want to call that. With today's modern leftist Democrat Party, mainly leftist, is it's not enough. They don't want freedom. And nobody's going to argue that I want tyranny. You're not going to have any pro-tyranny rallies. You're not going to have, everybody says they want freedom, but you go, what is freedom? I mean, this side can't say they want freedom and be diametrically opposed from this side that says they want freedom. And they can't both want freedom, because then they'd all be together saying we want freedom. All right. So clearly there's not all the people that say they want freedom actually want freedom.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a rally for tyranny in the park. We want to tell people what they can and can't do. But let's just be real with all of their things. They really relish it's not enough that they have freedom to go to their doctor, to do their thing, that they wear a mask, that they take a vaccine, that they do these things. It's that it needs to also be imposed across the board to everybody. And that's the only way that they're happy. That's how it seems.
Well, and the other thing, Chris, that we have to remember as Republicans, we can't give up any ground on any argument. When I'm in front of a committee and someone's grilling me over my bill or grilling me over my beliefs, right? And they throw out this ridiculous premise. Like you said, I was called racist. I was called homophobic. I was called every name under the book. Now I know that means that their cartridges are empty. That's all they've got, right? That's all they have left in the toolbox.
Yeah.
So I know that means I win. But other people, they take that personally. And so when they throw those attacks at you, you realize, oh my God, they're out of ammo. They're out of ammo. And I'll give you a good example of that. No pun intended. Probably the most difficult debate I had on the House floor, right? And I know this is near your community down there. I spoke up about the gun bill that would have restored gun rights to our 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Because let's be honest, if we're talking freedom, that's number 2 on the list. That's the Second Amendment, right? Right behind the freedom of speech is your freedom to bear arms. And it doesn't say anything about putting age restrictions on there. It doesn't say anything about putting any kind of restrictions on there. So when the bill came up to restore gun rights to the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, I was one of the first freshmen, if not the first freshman, to co-sponsor it. And when the bill was up for debate on the House floor, that was probably my most difficult time, right? Because we heard about 30 or 40 minutes of people in your community down there, people on the other side of the aisle who it was Parkland, 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 right? It was a lot of emotion. It was a lot of it. Obviously, it brings back a lot of horrible, horrible memories. But Chris, I'm telling you, Republicans, we cannot be cast as people who are heartless, because look, I'm not heartless. I think you probably saw me break down a couple times on the House floor. I mean, we're emotional people too, but that doesn't mean you take that emotion and you do bad things with that emotion. It doesn't mean that you let people monopolize the argument over emotion. Look, I'm very emotional when it comes to Parkland. I live 12 hours away from you, but I have visited Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And it wasn't a photo. I didn't call anybody and say, hey, get some TV crews there. I'm coming to Parkland.
The people that do that, it's like, really, I see that before, where they go in front of the school, and it's like, why is Sun Sentinel and Channel 10 there? Like,
yeah, I just happen
you called them, really?
I happened to be visiting my son at college, and I had nothing to do one afternoon, and I was reading the paper, and I was like, holy crap, this is only 20 minutes away. I'm going to go check it out. So I parked at the little shopping mall right there, right by the bank. And I walked about the quarter mile up the road. I sat in the memorial garden there for a few minutes. And, as Republicans, we can't cede that territory. We can't say, all right, we surrender because you invoked the name of Parkland. We lose the argument, because you know what? I've been to Parkland. I feel for those families. What that monster did at Parkland, that was despicable. That was disgusting. That was horrific. That was evil personified. But Chris, we don't punish all of the good families at Parkland to make amends. And that's essentially what we did. I told the story of the hero of Parkland, the kid who held the classroom door closed, and he was pretty much shot to within an inch of his life. He took at least 5 serious wounds holding that door closed. He was 15 years old at the time. They refer to him as the hero of Parkland. And Chris, how did we reward him? We rewarded him by stripping his gun rights away. That kid today is now a 20-year-old adult. And if he wanted to go buy a skeet gun in the Dick's Sporting Goods, he would not be able to do that on his own. And that's just wrong. And again, to me, that's just one example. When the Democrats, when the liberals, when the woke mob, when they try to bring emotion into the argument, look, we're emotional people too. We feel for those families. We feel for those kids. That doesn't mean what you're proposing is the right way and what we're proposing is the wrong way. I say punish the evildoers. I say focus on mental health. Let's be honest. That shooter, that kid who's now going to get 3 hots and a cot for the rest of his life, that kid had warning signs from the get-go. We've got to treat mental health seriously. The answer isn't to confiscate my son's skeet gun. My son's skeet gun never hurt anyone. The answer is to find out who's going through these tumultuous times, who's got the serious mental issues, because we all know it's wrong to kill, right?
Most people do. Most people.
Well, Chris, and as a doctor, Chris, in our psychiatry court,
it's okay. And that's why we have prisons, and that's why we have the death penalty back.
Well, and I guess that's why they allowed abortion for so long, because I guess people did think it was okay to kill. Well, obviously it's not. And Chris, listen, they used to tell us in medical school, I still have my old psychiatry book from 1996 that'll tell you, hey, one of the first signs that you've got a troubled kid on your hands, they're cruel to
animals. Yeah.
Now, why is that in the psychiatry books? Because everybody and their mother knows, you're born with that in your heart to be nice to God's creatures. And if that's not in your heart, oh my God, we're talking about some evil dudes there, man. And so that's what we need to focus on, not on taking guns away from law-abiding citizens. We got to focus on stamping out evil wherever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people, you call the Parkland shooter a kid, people got to remember this wasn't a kid. This is an adult male. This would be like if I went and did something he was not in school there. This was an adult male. He had graduated from there. Just walking into this place and doing what he did. And I always ask what kind of drugs or and this goes in with the Medical Conscience Act, what kind of drugs was this kid on? Because they this adult on, but they use kids as science experiments. Like, okay, let's try some of this antidepressant and that antidepressant. What are the side effects? Well, suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts. Never mind how you feel when you get off this stuff. Let's toss some Adderall in there. Let's toss some, and you turn these kids are going to these psychiatrists who spend like 5 seconds with them, and then they're adjusting and readjusting, and then God knows that they're actually taking the medicine the way they're supposed to, because with some of these drugs, the thing is okay, if you're taking them like you're supposed to, maybe it'll be okay, but some of these drugs have homicidal and suicidal thoughts as the listed side effect. So maybe it might be a good idea to possibly not give some of these drugs to children and find other ways, right, doctor, to address some of their problems, because some of these drugs have unpredictable side effects, especially when you abruptly stop and things like that. So, you said something at the very end, and we'll wrap it up, unless you had something to say on that.
Yeah, well, it's funny, Chris. I think when you and I were growing up, we're probably roughly about the same age. You look younger than I do, but when I was growing up, my outlet was heavy metal. I'm rock with the doc, right? You see me post me jamming with my sons with heavy metal stuff. So it goes along with what you're saying. Back then, you would find a healthier outlet. My parents didn't take me to the doctor and say, give them Zoloft. My parents said, go in your room and turn up Animalize. Go in there and turn up Motley Crue Theater of Pain. That was your outlet. And that's why when these concerts came to town, that's why you were there, head banging and putting your fist up in the air, because that was your outlet. It never occurred to our generation, let's go buy a gun and shoot up a building. It's just, these thoughts are evil. They're arcane. We've got to get back to healthier things. And just like you were saying, heaven forbid if you take a Zoloft or an Adderall, heaven forbid if you take that and then you combine that with alcohol, or you combine that with marijuana at the school, or you combine it with other psychotropic street drugs that kids can get their hands on nowadays. So I want to commend you for recognizing that. There's not every answer can be found in a prescription or in a bottle that you get from a pharmacy. A lot of those answers can be found just by sharing your stories with other people. Getting out, getting that anger, get that angst, get that aggression out. Go listen to some Ghost, or go listen to some Kiss or something like that. Wasp came to town recently in Orlando. Go see some shock rock. Get it out of your system, right?
Yeah, I like to go and dance to EDM, like Fiesta, Armin van Buuren, stuff like that.
Well, hey, Depeche Mode is back, and Duran Duran's coming.
That's awesome. Now, those are bands I love. Now, yeah, I think you're probably I think you're a Gen Xer. I'm just on the cusp. I was born in '82, so I'm just on the cusp of millennial generation. But
oh wow,
it's funny, like our generation, the difference between our generations, and we're so close. So many times it's like your generation doesn't care about Twitter and stuff like that. Our generation is like, we gotta be on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. But
I gotta be honest. I love Twitter. If any of your people out there are following me on social media, definitely follow my Twitter. I cut loose on Twitter because I figure screw it. I put all the good stuff on Twitter. My Facebook is more kind of the polished version. So definitely.
I think it's supposed to be the other way around, but that's cool. So, you said that, being up on stage with DeSantis, and that's just got to be great, and you said, let's take the Florida blueprint, let's bring it to the rest of the country. Would you like to endorse Governor Ron DeSantis for president?
So I tell you what, I have never, ever seen a governor do what this governor has done. Chris, let me put it to you this way. When I was under duress, right, when it was looking like it might be curtains for me, okay, it was the federal officials under a Republican president that were making the rules, right? It was my Republican governor who saved my career, saved my life, and showed me there was a different way. And so when the chips were down, I mean, again, I love everyone. I love every Republican. In my opinion, President Trump has been the best president of my lifetime. I used to say President Reagan until there was President Trump. President Trump is the greatest president of my lifetime, but I truly believe that when the chips were down, I think we saw our next president rise to the forefront. Because when you look at, I know people are going to say Kristi Noem and all that, but look, South Dakota is a whole lot different than Florida.
A lot different.
Ball game, right?
Their whole population is like a quarter of Broward County.
He had to sit there and take the heat, not just from the feds. He had to take it from Leon County. He had to take it from Broward, from Dade. He stood in there and took some strong arrows. The press conference that did it for me, Chris, I'm sure you'll remember. Remember, he held that press conference at USF where everyone behind him was still in the mask. And my governor, my great governor, turned around and he told him the truth. He said, look, you can do what you want, but you look ridiculous. Those things aren't necessary. The Surgeon General's right here to tell you they're unnecessary. That's what clinched it for me, Chris.
That was just great, and he went in because he saw that for what it was, is when he went and he had a bunch of kids lined up behind him in masks. Not only was that stupid, but it was clearly set up that way. Okay. Yeah. No doubt somebody thought that would be a big, riot if they could get a nice picture of DeSantis with no mask in front of a row of mainly African-American students, all in masks, and how that would have looked. And, he went to them and he really, when he did that, it really looked like what a father would do, because a father says a father loves somebody enough to tell them you look stupid and you're being misled, and you need that kind of authority, that kind of person to say, no, take that off. You don't need it. If you want, and he did say, if you want to wear it, but that really just reminded me of a father. And I just can't remember the one smile. There's a picture of the student and DeSantis is smiling. He's actually lost a lot of weight since then. I looked at that picture. Yeah. He's lost like 30 pounds. The kid's smiling like this. So can I take that as yes, you do endorse Governor DeSantis for president? Can I run that headline?
I love our governor, and I look forward to going to Iowa and New Hampshire if I get the phone call. Let me tell you.
All right.
But you heard me say the other day, the roots of liberty run deep. Now, I've got a wicked libertarian streak in me. And so just to be clear out there, look, if you're somebody with an autoimmune disease, or if you're a kid, look, if you want to wear a mask, knock yourself out. That's fantastic. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but you damn sure better not tell me what to do.
Right. And just that whole trying to impose their will on other people was just crazy. So,
well, man, listen, this has been fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
And thank you very much. It's been great. So I got some great clips to run with. I'm going to post this up all over my social medias. It's just been great to get to know you a little bit, Dr. Rudman. Congratulations on your successes getting these medical freedom bills through. And I'm looking forward already to the next session and what you're going to be able to accomplish next.
Well, listen, stay tuned. And now that you know I'm a freshman, you're going to cut me a little slack, right? You're not going to run me all the way to the top quite so fast, right? Let me grow a little bit.
You strike when the iron's hot, and sometimes God's been building you up your whole life to do something, and sometimes it happens fast. There's not this, oh, I've got to do this, because people, when I said that, there's some people like, oh, well, he needs to be in a cabinet position first and this and that. Look, DeSantis, there was the guy that everybody was saying is going to be our next governor. Oh, it was going to be Putnam. It's going to be Putnam. And he's this kind of boring establishment guy that probably would have gone along with lockdowns. He probably would have gone along with he probably would have been like a Chris Sununu type, or a Mike DeWine type, or one of these guys. He probably would have just gone with he wouldn't have. I mean, DeSantis, people forget this because now it's fashionable to be against masks. But at the time, he unmasked the kids during when the Delta variant started. He unmasked the kids, and the next thing they start going on about the Delta variant and saying that it's his fault. He's a mass murderer. They were just attacking him, and he held strong even when they were suing him and doing all these things. So,
well, Chris, I tell you what,
Putnam would have done that. I don't think so.
I tell you what, Chris, I'll make you a deal. I know you're pumping my tires, and you're talking about setting your sights high. I will listen to you. I will take your words under advisement depending on next session, because my priority next session is going to be a bill that we didn't get through this year. So I had a bill out there that was going to redefine exactly what a public health emergency consists of. Now, long story short, the bill's going to make it virtually impossible for your governor or your state government to ever lock you down again. To do so would require legislative approval. So, you talk about higher office and whatnot. No one wants to be a dictator. No one wants to be a tyrant. Let's have equal branches of government. Let's listen to we the people, and I'll consider it. How about that?
Okay, great. Yes, and this actually was a bill that you did try to get through this year. And what this bill said is that if a governor declares a state of emergency, because the state of emergency in Florida didn't go as long as everybody else's, but it did go on like a year. I mean, it was like a 13-month emergency before DeSantis finally ended it. But under Dr. Rudman's bill, which unfortunately didn't get through this year, it would require any emergency that goes beyond 60 days, you must get 2/3 of the legislator approval. And that's what that is doing, guys, is that's putting the power back in the hands of the people, because a governor really should not have this unlimited authority to just at the strike of a pen to be reauthorizing. So I assume that'll be the same bill. And this is also the bill that also removes the ability of the public health official to order a treatment or because there were some people that were saying that DeSantis signed a law allowing forced vaccinations. Do you just want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, he didn't. What it is, the language is written pretty broad instead, because no one could have envisioned what we went through in 2020. So yeah, you're correct. Our public health emergencies bill, when it comes back bigger and better next session, it's going to have a protective language in there that will reassure people that nothing's going to ever be forced on anybody again. But I tell you, that's the priority for next year. If I can get that across the finish line, well, then maybe I'll start to believe some of the hype that you're pumping about me, Chris.
All right. Dr. Joel Rudman, state representative from the Panhandle. You want to say where you're from again? And
so my hometown is Navarre. I'm actually the first ever state official from Navarre.
Wow, how cool is that? Doc Rudman, congratulations on your legislative victories, and it was great to talk to you. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, anytime, Chris. Thank you so much, and go Governor DeSantis.
All right.